So, but it does tie into what I want to talk about, which is the predominance of AUM as a billing method. It does cause a distortion in thinking that I'm going to elucidate pretty deeply. Should I go for it?
Rock and roll.
Okay. Y'all should get very excited right now because I'm about to go bananas. And I'm going to issue a call to arms. I'm looking for members of the Society of Actuaries, NAFA, IRI, and any other industry group that you can think of that might find this topic of concern. I am about to make a big, bold assertion, which I will back up with 3 less big assertions. So big, bold assertion number 1 is that non-codification of verb sales in insurance means that intellectual property cannot have value in insurance. I now will defend why this is true with the following 3 assertions. So mark this moment in the podcast so that you can tag the people that you know from the industry organizations I just mentioned and tell them when to start listening. It's right here. Okay. Non-codification of verb sales in insurance means IP can't have value. Why? Well, the above mentioned fact is true because of the intersection between how products sell and how trademark law works. I will explain further in a moment. Assertion number 3 is that intellectual property having value is fundamental to the functioning of a capitalistic system. Assertion number 4, in a demutualized world where insurance manufacturing is now entirely vertically disintegrated from distribution, IP can only come to have value by codifying insurance advisement as a scalable, overseeable, nationally regulated discipline. So now I move to proving assertion number 1, IP has no value in my domain, by proving assertions 2 through 4. Starting with assertion 2, part 1, how do products sell? To understand this, we need first to define the word product and then the word sell. Products are nouns. In the context of insurance and financial services, products are issuable containers and their distribution is highly regulated. Products are issuable legal contracts within which intellectual property can be embedded, and in exchange for the distribution of which, compensation can be paid to a financial professional in respect of either, but never concurrently, A or B. A is from inside the noun in direct respect to sale thereof. This refers to agency and brokerage. Whereas B is charged upon the AUA or AUM there formed following a product's introduction into an advised portfolio. Thus, B refers to the RIA channel. Now that we know what product means, we move on to sell. Sell means the exchange of remuneration in direct respect to X. X is a verb in the RIA channel, and it's a noun in the agent or broker channels. Wholesalers are people who so routinely sell wholes that we can describe their identity by adding an R to the end of the verb that they routinely perform. By analogy, runners routinely run. We don't call someone a runner who once ran across the street. So, wholesalers sell nouns. Wholes are nouns. The human mind can't conceive of the premise of a whole verb. Therefore, wholesalers are people who sell wholes. Wholes must be nouns. And nouns sell only when they have a wholesaler selling them. Wholesalers work for either a noun manufacturer or a noun seller. An organization that sells nouns will not switch which noun it has its wholesalers focused on selling unless the new noun is more profitable than is the incumbent noun portfolio. That's the reason why a product concept cannot have value, because what is valuable about the product, the noun, is the seller's prior investment in manufacturing and or wholesaling infrastructure, not the clever intellectual property that does not deliver a higher profit margin than the incumbent. Okay, so that's the first half of assertion 2. It goes way quicker from here, so it's like, stick with me, okay? It's like lightning from here, okay. The second half of assertion 2 is about trademarking. Okay. Trademarking, and the application of trademarking is different for a brand name than it is for intellectual property. The how you defend a brand name in court with a trademark, it's really easy. But defending intellectual property via a trademark has more challenge to it. And in this case, I'm talking about intellectual property protection. The defense of a trademark requires the intellectual property to be noun embeddable, whereas intellectual property that is service marked requires the IP to be verb embeddable. If you Google trademark definition, you see that when applied to intellectual property defense, as differs from brand defense, that the definition of this word requires the IP owner to be able to either manufacture or to sell. Remember what sell means from the above, the noun, right? So product concepts can't have value because of the intersection between how product sells and how trademark law is applied. Okay. Insurance is the liability or contra asset minimization field. What? Just stick with me on insurance is about minimizing consumers' liabilities, okay? And I'm not going to bring up the contra asset thing again. It's super complicated. So I'm going to shorten it by saying liability minimization. Okay? Insurance advisor is not a defined term. Financial advisor is a defined term, and it means person who holds the authority to sell verbs. This means person has an RIA affiliation. RIAs sell verbs only. Agents and brokers sell nouns only. Financial advisors provide ongoing asset maximization advising, and they frequently receive their compensation via AUM. Okay? This asset maximization advising is a service. IP embedded in services, for example, managed account services provided by Morningstar Inc., are service markable, thus they have been service marked, not trademarkable, and not trademarked because they're verbs, which are services, not nouns. Absent codifying insurance advisement so that insurance professionals can also sell verbs, by which I am saying, absent popularizing a billing approach like benefits under advisement or income under advisement, there cannot be value to intellectual property in our field because you cannot defend it via service mark, because there is no framework for scalably selling services in our domain, and you can't sell it as a noun because an organization can only monetize a trademark in insurance from previous investment in manufacturing and distribution. An incumbent only does this if the product is more profitable than its existing portfolio. That's not likely in today's fee-conscious environment. So again, because my prior words are true, not having a scalable advisement frame for liability reduction means intellectual property that is service marked in our field also cannot have value because it cannot be sold. So concludes my proof of assertion 2. And I'll move on to assertion 3 unless there are questions, which I'm sure there are many.
This is a complex geometric proof you're taking us through here.
It is. I understand that, but I'm doing it for a reason.
Yeah, you're on mute, Paul.
I want the industry organizations that are flagged to hear this, that like replay it. They're going to have to replay it a lot of times to get the logic. And so I'm going really in depth into what the logic is so that it can't be said. She just at a high level said, something crazy, and she's always saying something crazy. So I can just kind of like whiff it off,
Yeah.
Like, I'm going deep into it because my words are true and they have implications to society more broadly.
Well, yeah, and I just one question, a couple observations. One is, can we put this in our show notes, or do you have this on a website where we can put a link to it? Because people need to read this. They will have to read this. Okay, good. Other observation is, these words are complicated. A couple things I heard in there. Agents versus advisors, it's even more complicated, Michelle, than that. Like, for instance, state of Connecticut does not allow us to talk about agents. Is that interesting? As a independent product manufacturer, we have to call them independent producers. Does anybody know that? Does anybody understand it? Do consumer? No. But that you are an independent, Ramsey is an independent producer. So just footnote that there are some very strange vagaries in existing legal structures.
That's the whole point. I mean, it's, our field is state regulated and every state has a different impression of what our behavior is supposed to look like. And so because it's not a nationally regulated field, you can't make it scalable.
Right.
But but because of demutualization now, it's no longer the case that distribution and manufacturing are in the same organization. So I'm not sure that I am sure that state regulation of products has merit. I'm less certain that state regulation of distribution remains the most meritorious method of oversight, given that those entities no longer live with each other.
Interesting. Okay, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yes.
Other observation. I love the concept of income under management. However, man, my head starts to spin because I think of any one of our products. Gee, is that I'm not expecting. Is that the guaranteed income off of the product? Is this the potential income based on
It's the maps of the guaranteed benefit made available through the product structure, or DOL's translation metric that was interim final guidance, I think became final guidance on second quarter 2022 statements that translated assets to income. That would be the appropriate method by which to accomplish a billing base for income under management.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it should be considered, in my view. And in particular, it should be considered because ERISA has retirement income in the name. It's not about maximization of assets. Everybody complains that DC is focused exclusively on asset accumulation. And you want to know why? It's because of the method by which compensation occurs, right? Like it always is, right? Everywhere in humanity, that's the truth. So, if we want something different and we continue to do the same thing, we experience the definition of crazy, right? So in order to accomplish something different, we must do something different. Okay. My third assertion is that the impossibility of intellectual property having value in my field is an offense about which utter outrage is merited. It is a direct affront to the very principles of capitalism. Capitalism as a governing frame relies heavily upon intellectual property being protectable and monetizable so as to encourage invention. Thus, I question, why is mine the sole field in this country to which capitalism is not permitted to apply? And why are other members of my community not apoplectic about my true words? Consider the implications that not codifying verb sales in our domain has now that post-secure annuities are permissible in plans. Plan advisors, like all other fiduciaries in America, are inherently taught that asset maximization is the only valid lens through which financial advisement can occur. Yet I believe that financials occur not only on the left side of the consumer balance sheet, but also on their income statement, their statement of net worth, their cash flow statement, and the right side of their balance sheet, which is where insurance plays. Plan advisors don't know annuities and vice versa. Advisors can't even begin to imagine why we insurance people believe our solutions have value. Because they are taught to see the world through the lens of asset maximization, and they're not taught about liability minimization as a valid entry point to a consumer finance worldview. Annuities in DC will only take off if we band together to fight for their place. Actuaries, for example, used to have a role in asset liability matching when we as a society had defined benefit pension plans. But now in DC, there isn't a natural spot for an actuary in DC because liability consideration is not yet required so as to advise in DC. Thus, DC, again, naturally emphasizes asset maximization. So, the Society of Actuaries, NAIFA, and IRI must all strongly consider the possibility that my words might be true. And if they feel they might be, they need to begin acting yesterday. Representatives of any of these industry organizations or other organizations that can help change the circumstances I have just described are invited to email me at mrichterfis@gmail.com and request a deck that further explains this perspective and the dangers that follow logically therefrom. Lastly, for this diatribe, I hold insurance advisement should be a national field. Again, it is not about the noun placement. It is about contextual advisement. It is not per se correlated to an individual contract, the way some state insurance law allows annuity consulting to occur. Thus, does not make sense to be state regulated, should be policed similarly to how RIAs are overseen. Achieving this framework is my career goal. 27 years remain until I begin taking Social Security at age 70. It thus follows logically that I will not stop truthfully communicating my concerns on these matters for at least 27 more years, or until it's solved. So I thank you so much for your patience and listening to me through all of that. I know it was a lot, and I know you suffered, but I think my words are true, or at least I'm scared they might be. So I feel that they should be considered. So thank you for giving me the audience to share that with.
Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts,
Thank you.
Michelle.
It's we already knew that there's never a dull moment with you, but you proved it one more time. I have a feeling we just went back to basically college, to logic classes, philosophical classes, law classes, math classes, accounting classes.
That's right.
And I always like the analogy between the balance sheet and the income statement. But you bring it a step forward, a step further with the right hand side of the balance sheet, the net worth, the cash flow statement, and in such an eloquent way. So I hope the stakeholders, it will make it to the right stakeholders, and we'll definitely push for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You guys really elevate the dialogue in our industry. I appreciate the work that you do so much.
Paul, you're on mute.
I'm telling you, it's 2022. It's almost okay. 2023. That will not be a word. But Michelle, no. Thank you. I think look, it takes a lot to change this world, and to provide more retirement security for people, especially at the workplace, is it requires a lot of different organizations and legal structures to change to make sense. Yeah. Especially when you think of a typical company may have employees in all 50 states. 50 different state laws may apply. Mm-hmm. Securities.
There's no commissions in ERISA. So how are you going to pay the insurance expert?
This is a challenge. So my question for you is, yes, we untangle the Gordian knot here. If I'm a typical employee 5 years, 10 years from now, how is the experience different than it is today?
I think it's much more likely that more plans provide access to a financial professional, like through the employer, a pre-vetted financial professional. I think that's already becoming a thing, and I think there'll be more of that. And frankly, there are a lot of plan advisors who are interested in entering into the wealth management domain, so they're going to gladly provide it. And that's going to be a threat to my people unless my people start moving towards the DC space, right? And how do we, have our place at the table, right?
Yeah. Well, Bruno, we literally are at the top of the hour. What last final words, observations?
Oh boy, I have a list of questions. I didn't even go through my notes and some of the things I wanted to talk about, and I wrote more. It's usually the other way around, so I don't even know where to start to even to even end this. But I'll simply say thank you, and we also very very much appreciate all you do for the industry in such a passionate and eloquent and rigorous would be kind of a word to use. So thank you.
So I'll just echo that. Thank you, Michelle. Look, you're willing to break some glass, which I think is always important. Right. And I'll tell the audience two things. One is I'm a huge believer in the potential for in-plan annuities and the DC, the importance of annuities in the DC space to solve the retirement problem, and basically putting my money where my mouth is. And as I take this journey, a lot of times when I want to find out what's going on, one of my very first calls is to Michelle Richter. So I would say that to anybody in the audience, you would do well to reach out to Michelle if you want to become more up to speed on really what is a very sort of complex space. So thank you for playing that role, Michelle.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Michelle, thank you. Mark, thank you. Hey, Bruno, what I would suggest doing is let's put your questions in the LinkedIn post once this thing goes live. Michelle, let's continue. Mark, let's continue the discussion
Absolutely.
there. A lot of threads to pull here. A lot of dimensions I think that we could explore. Please.
I am an interesting follow on LinkedIn, so consider it. If any part of this was appealing to you, you should consider following on LinkedIn.
No, I agree. So, okay, continue it there. We'll move this from audio to text on LinkedIn. Mark, Michelle, thank you. Ramsey, Bruno, thank you. Michelle, either send us a link to what you just read or send us the text and we'll pop it in the notes. Give us feedback. You're listening. Thank you for sticking with us. Give us feedback. Give us questions. Give us guest suggestions. We definitely listen. And tune in again next week for another great episode of That Annuities Show. Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.